Hi, I'm Jim Peterson, founder of Stress Master International. Today we're doing a webinar on how to use the SMQ in a coaching session. The following is a recording of the webinar or seminar that I conducted, and we start off with an interview between myself and Ruvi Makuni, who is one of my associates. Ruvi and I role-played a situation where I was the coach and she was the client. And during that time, we're doing a very short overview of what might be included in a normal feedback or discovery session. As you will see, Ruvi and I have just begun the process of talking about how she responded to the SMQ, and we are discussing various ways in which to interpret the results. We enter the seminar a little bit into it, but I think you'll get the idea of what we're all about. I have just begun the process of going over Ruvi's Stress Master report, and we're talking about how she responded to the different questions on the SMQ. So, Ruvi, I'm glad you've taken it. And one thing I'd like to start with is if you've taken a look at the process that we look for, we start high and we go deeper and deeper into the data, into how you actually responded to some of the questions. And it's most important as we go forward for you and I to work together to identify and understand some of the behaviors that you're exhibiting that might be causing you stress or might be the result of stress. So that's kind of like where we want to go. Is that okay with you?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Well, as I said in the beginning, there's a couple of things I want to say. You can always change the way you answer the question. It's not set in stone. So, for example, you might have said you scored high on one particular question, but maybe that was a unique time in that particular day or that week. So, changing it is okay. The really issue is how do we look deeper into the meaning of each of these scales and each of these questions. So you've seen this. I'm going to pull up your report, and the way I work with this, and I've asked you to identify yourself with a yellow marker or check mark. Yes, there are a number of things in here that really pop out. What really stood out for you in the short time that we have together today that maybe we should talk about? So there's anger, there's perfectionism. So give me your feedback, your take on what you took away from it.
Well, I never thought that I was an angry person, but looking at this, it's really made me think. I will reflect a little bit more on what I can do to change. And I guess anger and perfectionism, because it's always run in my family, to be perfect. And so I certainly want to change and I want to be a better person.
Mhm. Well, I can see that you pointed out here that you don't like to have see mistakes from others. You tend to overwork a task. Does that get in your way in some way, or does that affect your behavior, your work, your relationships with others?
Yeah, it certainly does. It never feels like I'm doing enough. It never feels like I guess looking at this has made me realize that maybe I'm a little too hard on myself and on others too. And it's probably impacting a lot of relationships in ways I didn't realize.
So one of the things about the SMQ is it's an awareness tool. It's not designed to be critical. It's really a matter of reflecting what you said, how you responded to these questions. So between the anger and perfectionism, is one more important right now than others?
Uh, I would say maybe I guess the anger, because I think perfectionism, it's something that I've been aware of in general, but maybe the anger, maybe if we could touch more on that, that would be great.
Okay, let's go down the page here. Another area that it looks like you're putting a lot of effort into is you like to move and talk and eat rapidly. You have a sense of time urgency. Where does that come from?
I guess it's my family. Yeah, I mean it's always been I live in the city, everyone's on on the go, 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 and I feel like I'll be left behind. And
Mhm.
Um, do you think that's also why I'm experiencing digestive issues?
Well,
Always eating.
that's a really good point. What is the relationship between stress in our digestive system and our muscles, our endocrine system? The answer is there's a great deal of impact. And I think you've hit it on the nail on the head. It maybe this is an area where you can begin to learn to cut back on the need to be always rushing, hurrying. When you catch yourself, those are the be things we could work on over time. Again, the goal today is to kind of give a review of some of the key areas. We're not going to solve problems today. We're going to begin to nick away at some of the areas that you think would be worthwhile. And so we're going to just continue on this process until we get down to the end. And yes, the digestive issue is a really good one. You also have a strong sense of feeling people are letting you down and maybe unappreciated. Is that somebody within your family or is that somewhere at work?
I think it's at work, probably at work, yeah.
Mhm. Why do you think that they disappoint you?
Well, it never seems like I guess I feel like I'm doing a lot, giving a lot, I work overtime, I'm there whenever I'm needed, but yeah, they just I just don't feel like I belong.
Well, there's a lot of little issues here, not and big issues that we can talk about. So again, the goal right now is to kind of have an overview. So there's a certain lot of things going on here. You're not as enthusiastic as you'd like to be. Maybe you're a bit down. Would you say you're kind of burned out?
Yeah. Yeah, I am.
Okay. Well, this might be a really important area that we should spend some more time on because it affects everything. And one thing I can say is that all these scales interact with each other. They're not pure scales. There's no one such thing as burnout. There's no one such thing as perfectionism. They're interrelated. But again, the goal of this is to kind of parse and bring out some of the more important areas. Uh, Underachievement means not really accomplishing what you set out and to do. A little bit of that going on here, avoiding tasks and thinking that what you do is rather pointless. So some of these issues right here relate to burnout and also anger. So as we go down, the good news is that you are taking some time for yourself. You take breaks, you take time to really relax, but it's difficult to slow down, which goes back to your time urgency. And if we take a look at tension, we have uh, on physical stress effects, we're looking at quite a bit. And so obviously stress is having an impact on you. And although we're going through this kind of quick today, what would be your most important area on which you and I can begin to talk about and work with?
I guess it will be how I can start addressing, the anger. I think that will be a great place to start.
The anger is a problem of expectations for self and others. So that is a very good place. And it's not an easy place, but it's a place where we can get concrete action plans in place. One of the things we're going to do today, and we are going to show you in a second here, is that we want to come up with a plan, a commitment for change, which I will show you right now. All right. What's your homework assignment after we're done today? Oops, I think I just lost it. Hold on. Where is that? Uh, I clicked off on it. Sorry. Um, we we're talking about how do we make the changes we want to make. So what I would like for you to do during between now and our next session is to begin to look at what we call commitment for change. Only you know what you really want to change. And maybe today you'll want to change anger and your expectations and issues that you have, and maybe perfectionism tomorrow. But let's start to look at one or two areas, and you can copy this for even two areas. We could work on both anger and perfectionism. I'd like you to complete this. And then between now and next week, you can send this back to me, or you can bring it back when we come together, and we can start getting into some of the real deep issues that affect each of these areas. And does that make sense for you?
It does. It does.
Okay. Because we don't change easily. Behavior doesn't change easily. Attitudes don't change easily. And your commitment to change is very positive. And that's why we're talking, because you've made a decision to do something about yourself and how you feel and how you function with people and your relationships with others. And we'll begin to take a look at this in greater detail. But to get started, this is where I think we should go. And if with that, I will say thank you, and we'll set up a time next week.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Okay. Obviously, we don't have much time to get into much, but what did you guys think of the approach? Both Ruby and I tried to make it as real as we can. This was not her. It's not her report. It is a real person that we have had and we work with, but that is an example of an extremely stressed out individual, which you're not going to always see. So feedback from the group, obviously we could ask more questions. We would go deeper. We would spend an hour together, not 15 minutes. So anybody have any feedback, or what did
Uh,
you
I
gain?
I do. Yeah, that was great. I know it's hard to do these role plays in a short amount of time when your Ruby has to go, but no, well done. And as a digestive coach in that too, I might have picked up on which may or may not be your area of expertise either, James. But for those who are health coaches and know about the vagus nerve and the sympathetic, I would probably drill down that a little bit more and ask questions and find out that maybe she has GERD or LPR, and the connection there between the vagus nerve and the sympathetic nervous system and the
Right,
parasympathetic.
right,
Yeah, and you can really then they're like, oh God, yeah, that and then you can go down and when you start really hitting on something that especially when you have GERD or LPR or chronic acid reflux, that's excruciatingly painful, and you can really leverage a lot of that, and then work on that, and then a whole host of things resolve
right.
themselves. So that was just one thing. But yeah, and I know too from using the SMQ and working with it, you don't want to, and I know you'll probably agree on this, you don't want to just throw the whole kitchen sink at them, right? Like
Right.
you're going to just
No,
take one thing and work at it at a time and say, okay, all of these things, which is the most critical that would mean something to you that
mhm.
maybe if we resolve some of the other things that are having issues might resolve themselves, right?
Right. Well, I think you hit it on the head. And before I comment on that, anybody else have any feedback? Yeah, Helga. Happy.
Um, I just have a question, which was a question at the university coach where we learned about stress. So, as a stress master coach, do we have a competency boundary where we have to say that I need to refer the client to a psychologist or to a different professional? Because as coaches, I mean, I don't know what is your background, but there is a difference between being a coach and a psychologist. So according to your understanding, is there a competency boundary where I say that um,
Yes.
I
The answer to your question is yes, yes, and yes. In this particular case, I would have gone even deeper into some of these issues and found out exactly who was she angry with, how does it, what person in her life, and how is this impacting all that's going on. And if I felt, take the depression side,
yeah.
the burnout side, if she truly is sad, and she is, and depressed, um, I'm not. If I'm a coach, I'm a psychologist. So as a psychologist, I would be inclined to work with her. But if you're a coach and you feel it's out of your boundaries, you need to get that person somewhere else. And
Hmm.
it
Yeah.
just
And
like,
Can I just add to that? Like, just not to say that you can't work with them still while they're seeing a coach. Lots of times people will see a therapist and a coach simultaneously, right?
Good point.
Mhm.
Good point, because they're totally different aspects of it. So excellent points. Again, going deeper and getting the individual to really share more, and that's building that trust. When we have trust and they respect us and we respect them, then things can be revealed. And that's not going to happen in the first session, which
Mhm.
kind of brings up when do you do the SMQ? And I was going to get in that later, but it's relevant now. It may be that you don't want to use the SMQ right up front. You might want to wait 2 or 3 sessions. As one, I've got an interview with another person who said that basically she uses the SMQ when she's doing therapy. She's a therapist. When she sees that stress is interfering and the person is not getting a handle on it. So I think timing is really important. In some cases, it's great up front as a diagnostic. If you get it, you can hold it back. If you say the person takes it within the first couple of sessions, you might say, well, we're just going to hold back on a little bit of this. Let's talk about it later. So you can really kind of judge what you should do. But your point about getting help from someone else is critical, very important.
Yeah. Can I just add one other quick comment? I know Rita has a question. I think this is important. If people are wondering what, in some ways, are the differences or nuances between, say, a coach and a therapist, like a psychologist, like James referred to, is typically a coach will have them look forward. A therapist might have you look a little more backward. So really with a coach, you are putting the responsibility on them with your help to look at forward-looking solutions. It's very action-oriented, right? Whereas a therapist may delve a little more into their background and their past and their family of origin and all these such things.
Yes, it depends upon what kind of a therapist you are.
Well, this is true. It can vary. It can vary. It can vary.
If you're a behavioral therapist and you're a cognitive therapist, you're probably going to be in the here and now more than you would be in the past. Not that you wouldn't be in the past,
Yeah.
but if you're a psychotherapist and you want to really get that person to understand the dynamics of how they became who they are today, then that's a whole different
With the
one. But you're
coaching, I
right.
guess, yeah, I was just gonna say with the coaching is more focused, I would think on getting them to come up with the solutions, right? And you're coaching them along the way, right? And you're not getting into so much of the psychological aspects of their life, right?
I think the boundary lines are very blurred.
Yeah,
And that it's not easy to kind of simply say coach versus therapist. I think when the person is in danger to themselves, in danger of others, or their behavior is erratic and uncontrollable, or there's something more like in major depression, that's when
yeah,
you,
for sure.
and I would do that as a therapist. I mean, many times when I was seeing patients, I would go, this is not an area that I'm comfortable with. I think you need to see Dr. So-and-so and refer that person out because we can't do everything. It's just not possible. Anybody else?
I think Rita had a question here.
Yeah. First of all, what I really liked about that is like you just basically went over the areas and then it's like what really stood out to you. And so allowing then the client really to decide what's more important. I did an SMQ with a friend of mine and she had like 5 different things and then we narrowed it down to 2, which was tension and perfectionism. And she didn't even realize that she was being hard on herself.
Right.
As far as referrals to professionals, I am gathering a list just through my networking because I'm not a therapist. I'm not. Yeah, I know a nurse practitioner who deals specifically with mental health. I know a whole bunch of counselors, so I'm going to create this referral list to say to my clients, and I'm not a one-on-one coach, so we'll talk about that later. But just having I think the referral sources the people you trust. I think it's going to be really important to say, I've worked with this person, or here are, 3 counselors that, I've met through networking and I like their style, and then you let them to decide, right?
Right. Arjuna, what do you think? Have you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I talk about this on a regular basis. There's always confusion around this factor. Um, what what uh, what are you actually asking there in that last part?
Well, I mean, how do you feel about the approach of using the SMQ in the kind of work that you're doing and how you give feedback to people? The issue of referring out, I don't mean that one. But I'm
Okay, yeah,
just kind of get your sense for kind of what you're doing and where this might
sure.
fit in and how is
Yep.
it?
Yeah,
That's
I tend to use the SMQ early on with my clients, not something I use down the road. I honestly haven't used the SMQ a lot. It's one of those things I'm start trying to get used to it. I'm a new coach, a couple years into it, just kind of laying the
yeah, but
foundations of
you're
being
a
a
fire
coach
chief.
first, right? So yeah, exactly. So a total different transition in my life from a fire chief to a coach, and kind of in that time frame I've been kind of learning how to be a good coach
Sure.
and not necessarily loading myself up too heavy with assessments and tools, but the SMQ has been definitely one from almost day one that I kind of was drawn to. So
Well, I appreciate that. I think it's not universal. It doesn't have to be used at all times, and I think one of the big challenges for many is just what we're talking about today, becoming familiar with it, comfortable with it, knowing when you should use it, or when would be most appropriate. And these are the kinds of things that will make a big difference in your work. Tell us a little bit about your background, because I don't think most of these guys know each other. You are a former chief of police, chief of fire.
a fire, yep. Yeah, so 25 years in the fire service, all in my own hometown, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But in 2021, I had to take a leave from work due to burnout. And through that whole process, I actually had several coaches supporting me through this. And one of them said, what's next? Kind of like we were just talking about now is future oriented is coaching, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of the things were, what's next? Am I going to go back to the fire service or not? So my whole life kind of transitioned in 2021, and I decided to retire from the fire service. Went to Royal Roads University, got my coaching certificate through there,
Hmm.
and then kind of launched my own business. Wrote a book about my journey, and kind of just launched my whole business around stress and burnout. Is
Are
kind of my
you
niche, and I
are you
work with a lot
working?
of first responders across North America in that regard.
That was my question. You're working with first responders primarily.
I would say high 90% is first responders. Yeah.
Yeah, we just so you know, there are materials that we created for correction officers. So when we talk about first responders, it's not too different to be a correction officer and be under unrelenting stress. It's a little even with a correction officer, you're really on edge all the time because you do not know what a prisoner is going to do. Same with the first responder, but they're similar. And one of the areas that we talk about a great deal is called hypervigilance. The problem with first responders and police and others in that situation is that their level of stress is at such a high level, but it becomes almost accepted. You know what I mean? It's like, hmm, it's the way I'm supposed to be.
Oh,
I'm
100%.
supposed to be tense all the time and on edge, which now we have what we call the adaptation principle, where we adapt. I used to say, well, when I was in graduate school, I made $2,000 a year, and then you get out of graduate school, and I spent it all. And then maybe you get your first job and you're making 10,000 a year, and you spend it all. And then maybe you make a little bit more, and you spend it all. So you adapt to higher and higher levels of stress, and that adaptation is dysfunctional if it's prolonged and chronic. So when we talk about working with clients and patients, that's really important to kind of see where they're at. Any other comments? Laurel, how about you? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and haven't had a chance to say hi.
Yeah, thank you. I have been a coach for 10 years. I found SMQ through the executive wellness coaching certification with Lisa. I'm in court. I now have my own private practice, so I do coaching exclusively, but I also do. I loved everything you said, James, around like the blurry lines between therapy and coaching because I do a lot of somatic work now, working with people in their bodies and um, trauma informed. So stress is a huge piece of it. So it's, where I was certified with my coaching certification was IPEC, the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching. And they have what's called an assessment called the ELI, which really is a measure of how you show up under stress or how you show up under quote unquote normal circumstances, which I've been using for years and years with people. But this tool actually helps get to the root of what the stress is. So I think that's really powerful. And so, yeah, a couple of modalities is private practice, but also going back into the corporate space as far as working with executives and how to help their teams. So I actually think I will probably move to the SMQ versus the ELI, to be honest, because the ELI gives awareness, but it's not actually getting to the root of where the stressors are coming from. It actually is you're meant to coach people on to pull out the awareness of where the stressors are coming from, but that's not as quick or as efficient. This assessment really does, I think, a really nice job of that. So I'm super new. In all fairness, I have a lot going on. So I've done the SMQ with one person, but I haven't been able to do like the follow-up session yet. So just really here to listen and learn on like how to do that debrief that you just did was really great. So thank you.
Well, that's good. That's why we're all getting together because most everybody here is kind of new. And what I have learned over time now that familiarity, practice, learning when it's time to use it, when it's not, and how to use it is really personal. And frankly, there's no one right way. I mean, I can give you all the questions that I might ask, but your style of coaching could be very different. So that's fine. Each one of you has to use what is good for you and integrate it as best as you can. I can say one thing, familiarity with it will help a great deal. And I'm always here to help if anybody needs some guidance or assistance and want to talk about something, I can do that because my goal is to help you do your job is even better than you are now and you even add to it and using the SMQ. When I created the SMQ, I'll give you a little background. Uh, I was founded a group called the Biofeedback and Stress Management Center in Tucson, Arizona. And at the time, um, I did a lot of work with biofeedback. I did a lot of work with people with TMJ and back pain, neck pain, gastrointestinal problems that had a stress related component. So I was working at the somatic level too. It was like helping people bring levels down using deep breathing and meditation. Not back then to meditation so much, but progressive relaxation and the biofeedback. Because I know that if we can get the homeostasis back and we get people to level it down, that's really good. As a little sidebar to this, some research came out recently about meditation and mindfulness, and they found at the university study that more important than mindfulness is hope. People that have hope do better because when you're under stress, then it's hard to be mindful. It's hard to stop everything and say, okay, I'm going to be mindful for the moment. I'll say to my wife, or she'll say to me, you're stressing out. I said, just be in the moment for the minute. Screw that. I'm ticked off at this, whatever, it's getting to me. But hope and positive mental attitude is more important than almost anything in bringing people out of where they're at and helping people have that hope through the use of all the modalities we're talking about is really important. So encourage the work you're doing, Lo, and keep doing that. Any other comments on that? Because I was going to go launch into one more thing.
Did you want me, might be an opportunity seeing Laurel as one of my graduates, did you want me to speak to what you were asking me to address there about the, how I use it in corporate or?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it won't take too long. I'll just go
Lisa,
through.
go on. Talk about how you used it in corporate.
Yeah. Well, thank you, James, and thank you for inviting me. And nice to see some of our graduates, Maria, Helga, Maria, Amrin, and Laurel. And hi, nice to meet you, Rita and Arjuna. Yeah, so I've been working with James for since I started probably 10 or 12 years ago and been incorporating the SMQ and his work and his great training and support in our different workplace wellness certifications. And as many of you know, we have a newly enhanced certified executive wellness coach course coming up. And the reason I'm mentioning that, that's starting in September, and several of you are going to be in that program or have already done it. Helga, I believe, has.
Great program. Great.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. So
terrific.
it's one of we do many different, but this is sort of and really quickly, the reason I formed this course years ago is because through our workplace wellness certifications, a lot of our graduates and participants at the time said, like workplace wellness is all great, but we need to find ways to support the leadership, get them on board, get them really resonating with well-being. And this is what this course does. It's probably the quintessential course of all we offer. But anyway, that's not so much important. But what I want to speak to you about is that in during COVID, we were requested, I guess, because of our work in doing executive wellness coaching, we were approached by a hospital again during the pandemic to work with 8 of their senior leadership members. Now, it took us about 6 months, myself and 2 of our graduates, to secure that contract. But what was really great about it is that the SMQ was such a valuable tool in that contract. And it was actually one of the things that helped us secure that contract because they asked, what about assessments? What kind of assessments will you be using? I said, well, we have a really great assessment, the Stress Mastery Questionnaire, and it really can help them individually, but collectively as a team. Because I was sensing, like all teams, right? They could use some support, in building cohesion, building authenticity, what have you, vulnerability. So we, myself and my 2 graduates, through the 8 people we coached, delivered and administered the SMQ. And they really found it insightful, but it was as valuable as it was to them, as I said, individually. Collectively, it was so powerful. And so we did up a little aggregated chart on how each of the team members scored. And we found a real common pattern. And what was really interesting, one thing that really stood out, which really was an aha for them, because you don't sit around as executives talking about this stuff, right? They're stressed because they're stoic, they got their armor on. They don't talk about their stress levels, right? But what was really interesting was what showed up for them individually and collectively was that the need, I guess, somewhat perfectionism, but and you would think at an executive level, they figure they got it all together, right? And that they're perfect in everything they do. But they really felt they weren't achieving enough. And that
Mhm.
really stood out for me. I thought, my gracious, with everything they've accomplished, they still feel they're not achieving enough. And so we talked about that. And we talked about it as a group and the level of openness and vulnerability. Even the CEO who I coached said to me after, like, this is really incredible. We've never had this kind of frank team discussion. So, it goes above and beyond just helping the stress. When we talk from a workplace wellness, a culture, all the systemic challenges, when you can achieve that level of intimacy among a group and get them open up, then that permeates and opens up so much more, functionality and high performance as a team when they sort of connect at that really intimate level. So I don't want to say too much more. You can certainly reach out to me one-on-one.
Well, I want to say comment on that because I think the underachievement scale actually had a higher correlation with physical problems than any other scale.
I can see that.
And what we're talking about here is people are actually achieving a lot. I had a client of mine years ago, and she was highly successful, and she accomplished everything she wanted to accomplish, and yet she scored high in the underachievement. But she never gave herself any leeway. She never gave herself a break. She was always pushing, and as a result, her stress levels were always high. And so the perception of underachievement is what's important. Not that they are underachieving,
Yeah.
but they perceive that they are, or they think they are, or they should be doing more. And so that scale is very insightful. And I've had several like you say that and I'll show you a scene from I have a videotape from another associate who works in the hospitals who took it after many years of not doing it, and she took it again. So I think, yeah, you're on the right track. And so it goes back to when we talk about the SMQ, it doesn't measure stress, it measures aspects of our life that impact stress. So we don't want to call it a test.
Mm.
It's not a psychological test. It is an awareness tool. And if you use it from that point of view, you will stay focused on what really is important to people. Because I have another one who's uh, he was working down in Mexico. He was the head of human resources and training, and for 5 years they were using the SMQ through another associate of mine. And one of his he said one day, he says, "Well, a manager came in from a department. And he says, 'What are you doing with these people? They're they're different. They're coming back. They're engaged. What's happening here?'" And all of that had to do with really understanding for each of the employees, helping them have a better perception of themselves and what their role is, and actually had a positive view of their role within that company, which happened to be Citibank, Banamex. And there's an interview in your resources of him in this. It's a cute story. So one thing I want to say right now is that when I was building the SMQ, the reason it came about was because I discovered that my patients, clients did not have a real good understanding of what stress is. And like you're talking about the physiological impact, sometimes we have to sell people on it.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to sell people that, hey, this is actually not helping you, and you are responsible for that. Oh, you mean I don't want to be responsible? That person, he's the stressor. He's the guy that. So when we get one aspect, of course, the SMQ are the stressors, and the key element of stressors is how many of stressors can in your life can you control? I can't, a few, but you can maybe you can influence. And so the word I have is I control no one, but
Mm.
I can influence everyone. And when back to anger and understanding the expectations that people have, if you look at that anger scale, perfectionism scale, some of these scales, it's all about control, trying to control others or maybe yourself. And behind that is fear usually of loss of control. And you'll see that, I'm sure, Juna, you see that in your group of people you work with, that there's a overwhelming strong need to control and think you can control the world. And there's a lot of strong people, but it's not something that needs to be there all the time. Have you had that experience, Arjuna?
100%. And I think it's not just the first responders that feel that way. It's also the public pressure that a lot of first responders feel, right? Is that I can never be vulnerable. I have to be that stoic first responder that never has any emotion or anything like that, right? So
Yeah.
it's internal, but it's also what our communities and what our environment kind of expects,
Yes,
which is
indeed.
not necessarily
Certainly sounds like
correct
a lot of
or
overlap
right.
with the executives like coached, right? Between the people you work with and yeah, and executive. I think there's a lot of similarities there in terms
Oh
of
yeah, for sure. I
name
recently
brand.
worked
I wonder too, just the fact being male is that stereotype that you're non-emotional and
100%.
yeah. And thank you for all that you've done. I used to fly in the trauma flight team here at Carolinas Medical Center, so in Charlotte. So first responders, yeah,
Yep, I hear you.
tough job.
But we are making headway. We are making headway.
That's awesome.
Well, Maria Alhouse, how are you doing, and what thoughts might you have on this topic? This is designed to be open-ended, and there's no one right thing to do here. But I'm curious about what you're up to, where you're going with your work and the kind of work you're doing, and how you might see the SMQ fit in.
Yeah, so well, thank you for giving me the floor for a few minutes. Just want to comment on your role play. I think it's really important as you did is, keeping it client-centered, affirming to the client that it's, not their fault, and keeping things redirecting and keeping things on task so that they don't get caught up in feeling, a sense of defeat as you worked through that evaluation. Client-centeredness is extremely important, especially when it comes to something that's as sensitive as this. I guess what I'm up to is
Well,
I'm actually,
let me comment on what you just said. That's a really important point you just made, because a lot of times we don't really put ourselves in the shoes of the individual to make it as client-centered as we could. And that's just part of how we function. But I think we're trying to get a message across to people that there is something they can do. You can do something to change, but people don't like to change. My joke about the psychologist and the light bulb, I've used it so many times. How many psychologists does it take to change a light bulb? One, but the light bulb has to want to change. So we all want these clients that want to change. And that's why I go back to, we're salespeople at times. We're somehow or another, we're trying to convince them in some way that they can see a path and a way to make the changes and then to reinforce that path. And when we do that, we see good change.
yeah, I mean, you're giving them a sense of self-efficacy that, they can achieve this. They just have to believe in themselves. Um, as long as you continue to affirm that and guide them through that process, that's the ultimate goal. So I've been actually doing executive coaching for probably the past, I would say, 5 years. I actually just got done taking Lisa's executive wellness leadership program, which was phenomenal. So thank you, Lisa. It was a great course. I want to go back to, so I'm actually in the process of getting my board certification in health coaching. I sit for that in November. I'm, also transitioning into my speaking platform in terms of, overall health and well-being and the importance of health, and especially when it comes to leadership. I'll be speaking at the Live to Lead conference next month for John Maxwell here in Pittsburgh.
Great.
So I'm really excited about sharing how health drives leadership in organizations. Going back to Lisa's comment on the vulnerability and the systemic effect that it had, I can't remember the name of the study, but I was just on the phone yesterday with an individual who is certified in psychological safety. And a lot of that in the workplace is related to stress and that safety of vulnerability. So the two are tied together. I wish I could remember the name of the study. I'm happy to reach back out to her and get that if anybody's interested.
Yeah, that would be great if you could share that. We'll share it with the group. It would be good.
American Institute of Stress was mentioned in that as well. So that's kind of what I'm up to. My ultimate goal is to really do workshop level stress mastery programs and offer that. I feel it's a big differentiator in terms of the landscape here in Pittsburgh, and I think it is definitely needed um, a needed service for sure.
Well, that's fantastic. And again, anything I can do to help as you go forward, let me know. And I think the group too, one thing that is we're seeing is that we're seeing collaboration between even one another associate, so that whether you keep all of you can keep your mind open to collaboration whenever it's appropriate. It may not be appropriate, but whenever it is, it's really great. And there's a lot of things coming down the pike that I'll share with you in a minute. But thank you, Maria. And I want to get Helga to tell us about what you're doing in Hungary and what your plans is, because Helga has translated the SMQ into Hungarian. Yay!
Hey, nice. You're doing all right. You have one of my other graduates doing the French version too, I believe.
Yes, we do
Ellie.
have Helena.
Yeah. That's great. Good to see.
Well,
Yeah,
tell
I still need to fine tune it. So it was translated by somebody. But in a yeah, I say a few words. So welcome everybody. It's great to be here. The way I'm using SMQ Hungary, or I'm will be using, is it's kind of very specific because I have recently graduated as a sport mental coach and gained a university level certificate. And in my thesis, we had to write a thesis like this.
Good
Very
job.
I was actually kind of I created an exemplary work because at the end of the graduation ceremony, I was the one who had to hold the presentation to the graduates and say thank you to the others. So it was a really nice achievement. And the title of my thesis was how the um, how we can support how we can develop mental stamina through stress coaching. So I had to work with a framework, and I had to involve the International Coaching Federation standards into my work and certain models that my teachers were looking for in my work. So, for example, the model that I was working with was the GROW model. So looking for a goal, reality, opportunity, and way ahead in my coaching sessions. And the way I had a client with whom I was using the SMQ, and it turned out to be a great tool. And it took me a couple of years to get here. So thank you for your patience with this, and also Lisa's program, which was outstanding, for taking me here, because now I have everything together to become a coach, a certified sport mindset and well-being coach in Hungary. So I found my niche, marketing and niche way. And just in a nutshell, how I'm planning to use SMQ in Hungary, as I used it with my client and it worked out very well, is that I know you said that you don't want to focus on all of the areas, but what I have done, I just prioritize the high risk, the medium, and the low risk areas in my coaching session. I started with a general chat, just like you done in the role play, how the client is feeling about the whole SMQ and where he or she feels the main areas are. And then we went into the high risk areas. And in parallel, what I was doing, but in a kind of natural way, as I let the client talk about the context of the question. So if it was anger or whatever, I asked the client if he could frame a goal for the what we would like to go or work ahead. And what we have done is that the client could frame a goal that, this is where the stress is happening with me. So my objective was to find the root cause, as I think Laura has mentioned. So to understand where the stress is coming from. And as I went through naturally through the sessions, so from the high risk areas to the medium, I was naturally referring back to the goal that the client has framed. And as we went through the session, it was a 60-minute session, the client could naturally state the goal that she would like to work ahead. And I think the beauty of the session was that I had two clients, and none of them expected that the root cause is coming from an area where they thought the problem could be. So for one of them, it was a business area, and how he's allowing himself to have minutes, 10 minutes or 15 minutes, where he could be himself and he could focus on his well-being and release stress and how he can incorporate it into the business life and during the day. And so I think I had aha moments with these clients because they haven't expected where the stress is coming from. And it was really great that it was themselves who stated as which is the purpose of the coaching. So I could get it from there. And also we worked on the low risk areas as well. I just asked them how they feel about it. It was a very short part, but it was an opportunity for best practices because these areas are areas where they are performing well. So they are doing something good, something great that they can move into the other areas, which is medium and high risk. And the way forward, I didn't go ahead because from there, I think the coaching session series could go ahead is that once we have a goal, then through the sessions, we could, I think, or I'm planning to take SMQ a bit away. And I would work on the goal that they set for themselves. How we get there, what is the reality now, what are the opportunities, what is the way forward. And my plan is that at the last session, when we have the way forward, how the client is planning to go ahead with his or her goal, then we would get back to the SMQ again, and then we would cross-check if that forward is really matching what were the root causes and the stressors originally defined in the SMQ. And I think this is in line with what you were saying with the commitment of change. So actually, we could work on that document as well.
Wow, you have explained it very well, and I think a good example of how to integrate it into what you do, which I think is really very important. And also, aren't you going to be possibly working with some teachers?
Yeah, in Hungary, so I'm just planning to be uh, a coach. So I'm just setting up my web page and logo and things like that. Actually, my name is going to be Velga Coaching. So I just figured out that my name means healthy and happy. So I just wanted to put some top
Great.
on it.
That's great. I like that. That's good.
So if
Fantastic.
clients contact me as Velga, I will write it on my webpage. I just want them to say the word Velga because in that very first moment they are already connected to well-being. Yeah, so that's
Good
just
move. Good move. Well, you're
um,
making some phenomenal progress. It's taken us a while, but
yeah.
one thing you know about me by now is that I'm very patient with people who are motivated, and you guys are motivated. I have many people who have become associates and they disappear. But the fact that you are all here today and you're playing a key role in helping each other, and Maria, I want to get back to you too. This is really more important than my trying to give you a didactic. I'll give it to you. I mean, I've got sheets of paper that you can follow and you can think about what it is that how you want to frame it. But I see a big movement happening this year in particular with Hungary. I now have a new person in Poland. I had a Polish version, and I lost the person 5 years ago. She got married and went to Canada. Uh, we are seeing big changes. I've got a new Dutch version coming out from the Netherlands. We have in one thing that's coming up real soon, and we're going to do a seminar with this. Is my associate down in South Africa, who is an organizational psychologist, has put together an online stress management program that has the SMQ as part of it. We're going to try to make that available to people, all my associates. So this would be something that could be picked up and used and integrated into what you're doing. And I think the word I've used a lot today is integration. Some of the best ways in which to use things is to integrate it. Standalone SMQ stress management program is fine, but it's best if you can take what you do and find a way to integrate it as part of your program because it really fits into almost any kind of program. All the concepts in the SMQ, from stress warning signs to stressors and stress effects, are universal. We all know them. Everybody, if you talk to somebody about stress, they'll give you a pretty good idea about how it might be affecting them. They may not pinpoint, anger or underachievement, but they'll be able to tell you about how it affects them physically. So I think, thank you again, and let's keep moving forward, okay? And I want to cover everybody a little bit more before I get into just a little bit of follow-up. Maria, go ahead, and Amran, tell us a little bit more about what, again, you're doing and how it's coming together and where you're going.
Thank you. This has been great and a lot of good points. I am, like I said, really working with health coaching one-on-one. A lot of times with stress, I think one of the things that people kind of latch onto is when you start connecting it with physical symptoms, right? Because that's something that they experience rather than kind of what we know is kind of just the mental aspect of it. But I think a lot of times people actually, if you talk about digestive issues or tensions or things that they are experiencing on a day-to-day basis, hopefully we get that message across and we can get them to be more aware of why is that? Where is it coming from? It's actually a lot of our, like you talk about in this SMQ, is just being aware of where does that come from and what are my actions around my experiences. So
great. No, I think that's what it's all about, is trying to help others. And Arjuna just put in a link on the chat. So that's the study on hope. Arjuna, is that the one?
I just pulled it up. I didn't want to lose that, so I pulled it up while you were talking because I thought that was a cool thing to
Yeah. No, I want to
get
see.
to. So I think that's
Yeah,
the right one.
if it's not, I'll get the one that there was two researchers, two universities that did the work too. So this is good. Again, the more tools we have, the better it is. So right now, let's see, everybody's had a chance to talk. Let me do a little bit of show and tell, because I think this will be, again, I want to be inspirational today. I don't want to just, you guys can do, I think, a great job of doing a discovery session based upon your coaching and training background. So I'm not worried about that. But here's a little couple of things I want to share right now.
I'm just doing a time check, James. I know some people might have to go. I think it's top of the hour there, so I'm not sure if you have.
Yeah. Okay. Well, do what you need to do. I'll be quick on this. So, can you see my screen? I won't get into that. I want you to hear. This is Lisa Perez. That's not Lisa Perez. That's me. But I didn't have her picture, so this is a video. This is an interview I did a few years ago, and Lisa's.
The following interview is with Lisa Perez. Lisa Perez is a well-trained coach here in.
Can you all hear me? Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Can you?
Yes. Yeah.
Arizona, and has been helping people for about 10 years or more. Lisa has been rather inactive as a StressMaster associate for a number of years. However, recently Lisa revisited the SMQ in terms of her work with clients and discovered some amazing things. And in this interview, she'll share with you how the SMQ has actually changed her life as well as her coaching.
I think it's first important to recognize, Jim, that even though I've had the tool for a while and I've gone through the training that you offer, and I took that assessment a couple of years ago, I don't know if you recall or not, but you requested that I take it again, or you suggested that I take it again, simply because I had some life events that had occurred with my family, with both my parents passing away in the past 10 months. And so I did, at your suggestion, I took it, and I couldn't believe how it read me like a book.
Well,
it read me like a book. And so for those reasons, it helped me to recognize, even though I was familiar with the tool and have been using it it made it a little more personal for me. So I think that's the first thing in order to be successful, is to really recognize on how it helps you. And by recognizing that because of the stressors that was going on in my life due to life events, due to the passing of my parents, that it really helped me manage myself. And that was a little more buy-in that I had than I had before. And so with that mindset, I took a deeper approach, or with my current clients. And I don't know if you've noticed, but since that time that I took that, that's when things really started moving a lot more than it had been. And so I have to thank you, first of all, for doing that and offering that for me.
Lisa goes on to share how.
So that's a really good story about, we can all get into a rut, and she was in a rut. Things happened in her life, and she took it herself as an associate and took it to heart. And sometimes we even need to take it ourselves and say, what can I learn about myself? Now, Lisa today is embedded in a hospital. She does coaching for a hospital staff here in Arizona. And so she's very busy working with not patients mostly, but mostly with staff, nurses and some doctors. So I wanted you to see that. Anybody have any thoughts about that? It was a pretty good interview.
I like how she just went and did it again and just really reconnected, because I think we can all lose sight of just how valuable and the ahas that people get from the tool. So I would encourage everyone, myself included, to periodically go back and just redo it, right?
Well, I agree. And then here's another interview. And this, again, these are all associates, and they're at different levels.
I've used it in a few different ways. I would say primarily I'm using it with the clients that I'm working with in therapy. When I start feeling like their stress is interfering with whether they're bringing in more work-related issues or health-related issues, or just anxiety, it comes to me in the session, and that's when, like it did this past week twice. But then I haven't really used it for months. So I think I need to do a better job at identifying the perfect client. That's my first thing. So I've used it so far randomly in my individual client sessions.
Again, the reason I show that is because we all fall into somebody could just not do it for a couple of years or a couple of months, and then they find that it's really worthwhile. So it's trying to give you hope that they don't get discouraged, that you don't have to use it all the time. My goal is to use it when it's appropriate. And Sheila said, find the proper client. It's also the proper time with a client to administer the SMQ as part of your program. So we have other interviews here. One more I'll show. Oh, you know what? I want to do Lisa's, how she does it. We didn't talk about the Stress Mastery Guide. The guide obviously is an important part of the process. And so one of the questions is, well, how do you use the Stress Mastery Guide?
In this next clip, Lisa will share the details of how she uses the SMQ with her clients, the nuances and the way in which she listens to her clients and is careful to integrate the SMQ into the total program that she has.
So once I speak with my client and I listen to what their needs are, and then offer the SMQ and base that per my own experience and how it's beneficial and how it's been beneficial for me, then that's the introduction I give. And then we send that off to them. We give them the link and they complete that assessment. And again, priming them, letting them know how important it is to be honest and truthful, like you said, and really looking at it as a tool that can help them. Then they take it. Then once I get that confirmation from you that it's been, gone gone through the process of being assessed and then I have that data, then I contact them, we set up a session and we go through it. And we print that out for them, and then we look at that, and then we just talk about it. We talk about the different areas of how how it has basically played out per the results, and how that is what is going on, or how can they connect what they see in the SMQ, and how does that relate to what they're feeling. And so we make that connection on how life events or whatever it is that those triggers are for their stress and how that's connecting. And I haven't come across anybody who hasn't said, yep, that read me like a book. And I'm like, me too. And so with that said, that's where we move forward. And then I ask them, okay, so based on some of these triggering events, what do we need to do next? What do we need to do as far as, filling the gaps and narrowing those gaps of the things that are triggering them, and how can we possibly set a plan forth and how to manage that. And then I bring the book out. So that's the second session. I bring the book out and say, okay, once we've identified what area do they want to focus on per the SMQ, then we will read I'll do the introduction, explain to them how the booklet is helpful for them, and then we'll take it piece by piece. And it's very intuitive on how I work with them, and I really let them decide how they want to approach it. And so there may be something, we'll just kind of flip through it together and say, okay, so of these things that we're identifying, there's these different readings that we can look at, there's this different homework that we can look at. What speaks to you? And then once they identify what that is, we go through that. Some clients, I'll go through it, paragraph by paragraph, and let me tell you, they just love connecting the dots on how their stress is connecting to what they're reading and how they can piece that together to really narrow the gap, as I had mentioned before. I have others who say, no, I'm good, I want to read it and then let's talk about it. And I'm like, okay, so we do it that way. So I'm very flexible on how this works for them. I mean, obviously, if they're taking the SMQ, they're stressed. And so the last thing I want to do as their coach is add more stress to their lives by putting something in place that's already competing with everything else they have going on in their life. So this is a very intuitive type of method that I use, and it seems to be working very well.
Okay. I'll stop, Sherry.
Can I just add to that a little quick comment or observation? I like what she said about not adding and overburdening their clients. And like for where I work with executive coaches and several of my program here that have done my program in this group, they'll say like, I don't have time to read a lot, And so what I've been finding now, or I'm going to be doing more and more of, is finding ways to chunk out, really key things in my resources that I think really speak to what I know their needs and challenges are, and sort of incorporate as little teachable moments embedded within the coaching session. Because to otherwise think that they're going to just sit down and read all the realms of information you send them, it's probably not going to happen. You can still do it, but to ensure that they do pick up and see key points, find ways to embed it in the coaching, right?
Right. Well, that's the way to do that. Well, we are now segueing into what do we do next? Now, one thing I do want to talk about very briefly is what Lisa talked about, Lisa Perez, that the guide, or the book, as she calls the book, is again an organic thing. It's something that you can use in a variety of ways. So you have to kind of read, as she said, read the person. Some people are very obsessive and they want to get into everything, and others just they don't care. The other thing I want to show you is you all have this in I have to share my screen again, I think. Where's my screen share? No, it's down here. Are you familiar with the workbook? How many are familiar with the workbook? Raise your hand. Okay, so the workbook is, and I just want to be really clear, it's now interactive. It's all where this can be sent to an individual where they can complete it. So if you take the anger exercise, and when you use these, you don't use this right away. You use it when you think the time is right. After you've identified one or two areas, and let's say anger is one of them. You send this to them, and then they identify it's not relevant to me or it's relevant. So if they can click on the radio buttons and they can send this back to you. And then down below here, uh, it says, what does it mean to score high to medium high on this scale? Type in or in what way you can change these behaviors. So they then can write in their ideas about this, because now what we're trying to do in here is dive deeper into the meaning of why this is there. What does this scale represent? Why does this scale represent a stress warning sign? What changes would you recommend to someone who scored high? Now you'll notice it doesn't say you. It says, what changes would you recommend to someone? It kind of takes it away from the personal and makes it sort of like, well, I can talk about somebody else and I can tell them what to do. So this would be something that kind of eases the way into um, reducing barriers. But to use these, you have each one is a separate page now. So you can send the anger exercise, you can send the perfectionistic exercise. Each one of these, and so if you look over here, those are the worksheets.
Is that something new, James? I don't know if I have that or not.
You do. It's in the resources, but you've been a busy girl, so
Probably.
so you probably don't see it, but you'll see there's. I'll make sure there is a compressed file with all of the worksheets in it, so that therefore you can print them out and put them in a folder. And when you want to send one to somebody, maybe you want to talk about life events or overview of the stressors, you can do that. So I wanted to be sure you were aware of that you don't want to overwhelm people with sending them the workbook. It's too much. It's best if you parse it out to one or two areas, and maybe over time they'll do more. It's up to you.
I love that idea. Yeah, I think that's great. I'm not
Can
sure
I
because you've made so many changes over the years, so maybe you can just send me an updated version of everything.
I
Yeah,
changed.
I don't, can I also ask where can I find this? I have so many resources, but maybe I lost where I can find that workbook. I
I
thought I
will.
downloaded them all, but maybe I missed it.
Yeah,
I'll make sure each one of you has a updated resource book, and usually it says a date on there,
yeah.
May of 2000.
And Laurel, you're in the executive coach course coming up, so we'll make sure that we go through all that too with myself and James.
Great, thanks.
What's your takeaway from today? I hope that maybe we've covered some topics and some areas, and you got some insight. Um, Anybody have any comments? Did we cover the right thing?
I have a quick question for everyone. So, I'm different from all of you. I am not a coach. I am not any kind of coach. 20 years of respiratory therapy, several years trauma flight team, 17 years massage therapy. I'm a workshop facilitator. So,
Okay.
I in the past have not dealt well with stress. I've written a book. I've created 5 journals. And so I teach workshops. So I have like a variety, maybe 8, 9 different workshops focused on journaling, aromatherapy, like all these different. So I've been struggling is a pretty strong word, but sort of trying to figure out how to fit this into my practice because I don't do one-on-ones.
Right.
So I will put my email there if anybody has any suggestions. But what I am going to be launching is a stress mastery series using the SMQ, like that's the homework after the first session, right? And then following up with different coping strategies.
Well, there's quite Maria, there's quite a bit of information in the resources for that cover how to use the SMQ in a workshop. There is there's two webinars that I did that go through it. Uh, it is a really great way to do it, and a lot of people doing exactly what you're doing. Yeah, we're talking to a lot of coaches today, but the people like Helga and others they're going to be doing much more than individual coaching. they'll be doing workshops and training and things of that nature. So uh, I can help you with that. The integration into a workshop is really a matter of deciding how it is you want to do your workshop and what is it going to cover. So, for example, one of my other associates has been with me for 17 years. She founded a company called Stop at Nothing, and she sold it off, but they did corporate executive workshops training and charged a lot of money for it. But they integrated it into a 2.5 day, 3 day program where they dealt with the purpose of one's life. They did the Myers-Briggs, they did the stress mastery questionnaire. They built a whole thought, and it's called peak performance. And there was peak performance 1 and peak performance 2. And they sold those to companies and organizations. In fact, the one in Banamex in Mexico did it for 5 years. We trained over 600 people. I didn't, not me, but they trained over 600 people using the Spanish version of SMQ. So the answer to your question is let's talk. Let's have a communication on that. Anybody wants to talk about that, it's a separate topic because we could only do one thing today. That's about it. Okay, anybody?
I've got some, oh, sorry, I've got a few ideas and I'd be more than happy. I love to collaborate, especially in different countries and stuff. I think it's really cool. So, and Helga, you're doing amazing things. Like, wow. So,
Absolutely. You're all amazing.
Jim, I mean, everybody's amazing. I don't, can you please get are we okay if we take the emails of other email
Sure.
addresses? Does everybody have permission to share, or just can we grab it from your emails?
Yeah, you can grab it from my email because all email addresses are on there. And
Okay.
you can send a list to everybody. And the more we collaborate and work together, the better it is. We're pretty much at the end of the day here. So I want to thank everybody for hanging in here, and hopefully it has helped and we've clarified some things, and I'm here to help at any time.